I call on one of our discussants to do a presentation, Mr. Uzo Obienu, who is an accomplished executive and public governance advocate. Over to you.
Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Please permit me to stand on the already established protocol. My name is Uzo Obienu. I wish I was the distinguished executive that he introduced, but I am a partner with KPMG in Nigeria. And I've had the privilege of interacting with our reforms for a number of years now. And so what we're going to do today is to attempt to look at the reforms and to x-ray why some of them may not have worked the way we envisioned that they should work, with particular reference to the missing link, consequence management. So over the next 20 minutes or thereabout, we will talk about consequence management and why it matters. So what we're going to do, please if you can go to the outline page. So we're going to try to get some insight into the various reforms of this administration in the last 2 years plus and see if we can make sense of some of them. Then we'll talk about the cost of reforms. You will agree with me that the reforms that we are currently undergoing, some of them are very painful. And so they must not be wasted. And then it is on the backdrop of the cost of the reforms that we're going to then examine why consequence management counts and why it should always be instituted in everything that we do. And then we'll go ahead and discuss a framework that we internally developed that should assist the government or even private sector players whenever they are thinking around a consequence management discussion or trying to institute consequence management as part of anything, whether policy or any design, anything that they're trying to design. We'll talk about that a bit. We'll also look at key elements of for successful implementation. And in looking at that, we will also paint a picture of what a proper consequence management framework implementation should yield. And we'll look at what will happen when it does not exist. I'm sure some of us already know about the second one. So, very quickly, I will start by asking us to cast our minds to say 2015. For those of us that will remember, there was this very interesting government policy around taxes. It was called the Voluntary Asset and Income Declaration Scheme. Can we remember? So we can remember, but for some of us, it's we're only hearing it for the first time. And right there is why we need to discuss this topic. In that year, I was privileged to be the lead from KPMG, and so we joined the Federal Ministry of Finance, and we went on road shows in Kano, in Enugu, and a few other places within the country, essentially asking people to declare their income, declare their assets in exchange for certain benefits. It was an amnesty program, a tax amnesty program. But after all the tours, the question is what happened thereafter? And that's why some of us can't even remember that scheme. Consequence management. Once there's an absence of it, we will just have, at best, aspirations. You know, things, wishful thinking, things that we wish will happen. But if you do not have, and you have not embedded consequence management in the fabric of that policy, then we will just be wasting our time. So that's one clear example of good, sound policy, well thought out, well intended. It was supposed to be such that we will get people to voluntarily comply, and then subsequently we can ride on that to then expand the tax net and also then move against those that did not take the amnesty program. But again, that failed because the consequence management framework was not followed through to the latter. So if we move to the next slide, I'd like us to look at some of the things that have happened in the last 2 years. Quite a lot of reforms going on in the country. Fiscal reforms, the most popular is perhaps the tax reform bills. But we also have monetary reforms going on. We have trade reforms. We have sectorial reforms covering practically the entire breadth of our economy. So quite a lot is happening, and interestingly, they are happening at the same time. Now, you may wonder, why? And why are they happening? Why are they happening simultaneously? Sometimes you find that if you need to get to the promised land, you may need to take on a bit together. There are times when you need to face, but sometimes there are certain policies that must necessarily work together. As accountants, we are very conversant with the push and pull, especially with monetary and fiscal policy. That consistency is required, and so many things had to happen at the same time. So on the face of it, a lot is happening. And you can argue that whether they are well-timed, ill-timed, but one thing that we cannot take away from the argument is that at some point, these things were going to be necessary anyway. So someone will say, if you're going to eat the frog, why wait? Eat it now. So it was going to happen anyway. So quite a lot of them are happening at the same time. But reforms can also be painful. If you go to the second slide, the next slide, we'll see some of the things that have happened following some of these reforms. If you recall, exchange rate, people talk about the exchange rate a lot, but sometimes I wonder how many people had access to exchange rate at this rate. But the exchange rate in May 2023 was 462 thereabout, 450 thereabout, but less than 500, definitely less than 500. Today, exchange rate is about 1,475. Interestingly, this figure has, it's been on the downward slide over the last 1 month. So if we had this presentation maybe last month, we would have seen 515 thereabout. But even at that, that's a significant movement. Then you look at interest rates from May 2023 and what we have currently, you can see that there's also a movement. But interestingly, that movement is also coming down. So that also tells you something about the reform and the progress that the reform is now, what we're seeing as a consequence of the reforms. Inflation is very interesting. And I was here yesterday when the first speaker talked about inflation and then talked about the rebasing and all of that, and there was an uproar in the room. Rightfully so, because inflation is not so much about the markets. Inflation is not so much about the figures. It's about what the market is saying and the impact it's having on the pockets of the individuals. But that's why I had to show what it looks like now under the rebased economy and what it was just before the rebasing. So you can see that reforms have caused pain, and significant pain, I must say. It's arguable that there's nobody here that has not felt the pinch of the reforms. But there lies the real reason why this topic is important and timely. If the reforms have cost us this much pain, then we must not waste the reform. Because if we do not ensure that all the pieces are well put together, then what will happen is that many years down the line, we will have to go through this pain, what? Again. So it's painful, we all agree, but collectively we must also agree that we will not waste the opportunity of the reforms that we are seeing, and we must follow through to ensure that at the end of the day, we are all better for it as a nation. Next slide, please. Now, if you look on the screen, you will see a word dump of a lot of things that must necessarily be in place for reforms to work. Broadly categorized into how comprehensive is that reform, how responsive is the reform, and then holding everything together is the sustainability of the reform over a period of time. The way reforms should be viewed is in such a way that reforms can outlive a government. The reforms are entrenched within our laws, entrenched within the very fabric of our nation, such that no matter what happens, no matter who is at the helm of affairs, the institutions are well strengthened enough to ensure that the reforms continue for a very long time. So there are quite a number of things there, but the wisdom of the organizers, they have asked us to focus on consequence management. So consequence management is not everything that you need, but consequence management definitely is one of the things that must be in place for us to begin to talk about an enduring reform that will deliver, that will deliver the benefits that we want our reforms to achieve. Please, can we go to the next slide? Next slide, please. So in this slide, what we have attempted to do here is, based on what we have seen as a firm, KPMG, based on our research and all of that, we have tried to come up with a consequence management framework which may be different from what your view of consequence management. Whenever we hear consequence management, the first thing that comes to our mind is how do we punish erring behavior? How do we ensure compliance, drive brutal and all of that and everything? It's part of it, but that is not the only thing that it entails. So we're going to look through this framework, and then we will understand why such a framework needs to be in place whenever we are thinking about policy and reforms as a nation, or even in the private sector. So the first element of this framework, we said, is impact assessment. If you are going to have a successful reform and you are thinking consequence management, you first have to tell yourself that, look, this will have short-term and long-term impact on the people. While you are looking at the ultimate impact on the nation, you must never lose sight of the people. When you listen to the president, and yesterday we listened to the minister, you will always hear this phrase, the most vulnerable in the nation, the most vulnerable. As you think about your reform must cater for everybody. Now, it may not cater for everybody at the same time, and this is very important. Because if you look at our nation today, headline figures are definitely improving, true or false? Headline figures are improving. Interest rate is coming down. I showed you in the prior slide. Even the price of PMS, as at maybe about 8 months ago versus today, it's not the same. there are small indicators that are showing that the headline figures from the macro perspective are getting better. But that's not where the reform should stop. The reform must also take into consideration short-term and long-term impact. Thinking about the people and also thinking about the nation, everybody, inclusive. The second thing that you need to do is to do a stakeholder mapping. How many people are impacted by these reforms? Put them in various buckets, identify the winners and identify the losers. Because in every reform, you will find that some are able to, ride it efficiently in such a way that they take advantage of it and they are better off for it, or already positioned to take advantage of it, while some may ultimately lose at the end of the day. So you need to be aware of that, okay? You must be at the level where you have mitigation strategies. You must be at the level where you can identify and say, these are the things that we are going to do to cushion the effect of the reform on everybody that you have identified to be vulnerable, everybody that you have identified to be a loser in the event of the reform. Your communication plan must be very clear, sincere, and you must be able to demonstrate real transparency and be able to answer the hard questions concerning that reform. It's only when you have done 1, 2, 3, 4 that you can then begin to talk about a deterrent mechanism. But what we see is that when people talk about consequence management, nobody talks about impact assessment. Nobody talks about how you manage the stakeholders. Nobody is talking about cushioning the effect of the reforms. Nobody is talking about a clear communication plan that helps people understand what you're doing. And then we jump straight to the deterrent mechanisms. And I tell you, maybe that's why a lot of it has not worked. It's like when you flog a child that does not fully understand what he or she has done. As far as that child is concerned, you're just a bully. But you need to go through the process, explain why that needed to be that way, and then say that when you do this, you will get punished. And this is why you are getting punished at this time. And then, of course, just like any other thing that will work, you must always continue to monitor and to have a feedback mechanism that ensures that that process is working and then is well put together. So if you look at this, if I stop here, I hope I've been able to at least debunk the myth around consequence management as a clear, what is the punishment? That's our view. What's the punishment? So, but that is not what it is. It's the framework should contain in small bits, at least all of the elements that we have described in the slide before us. Can we move to the next slide, please? Now that we have a view and we understand what the framework is about, the next question is, if you are going to implement this framework, what do you necessarily need to have in place for it to work? What are the key elements? And we're just going to discuss just a few. It can be longer than this, but I've tried to box them into just 4 major elements that will ensure that consequence management framework is properly implemented. The first one, and I dare say might be the most important, is the tone at the top. If it is going to work, communication at the top needs to be clear. That's what they call in leadership the shadow of a leader. When you want to do something as a leader, you talk about it, you reward it, you incentivize it, you punish behaviors that are against that. Anywhere you go, you carry that shadow and you are saying that this is important, this is sacrosanct, this is critical to the success of this initiative. So the tone at the top is very important. But oftentimes when we talk about tone at the top, it's easy for us to say it's the president, it's the governor, it's the National Assembly, it's every other political leader. But I dare say that any reform that will have consequence management framework properly embedded in it must also have the consensus of the elites. It's not just about the political leadership. A lot of us in this room also play a very critical role as far as consequence management, embedding and implementing the consequence management framework is concerned. The elites, very important, okay? If anything is going to work, the buying and alignment from an economic and the political elites is one thing that necessarily needs to be in place. So we can agree that there are a few things that have worked in Nigeria and worked very well. If you check closely, it concerned the elites as much as it concerned the what? The common man. And so everybody is on all fours on the necessary things that needed to be done for that to work. Similarly, with consequence management framework, the elites, the tone at the top needs to be clear, and the elites must, together agree that this needs to happen. Again, if you do not codify the principles that we have discussed prior to this slide in such a way that it's institutionalized, in fact, I dare say it is codified in laws, then we will have, just pieces of papers without the real force that a consequence management framework should carry. So whether it's at the government side of things or whether it's in our offices, it needs to be such a way that it is part of what guides the organization, whether it's your SOP, whether it's the laws of the nation, whether it's in the tax laws. If you look at the tax reform bills, you will see consequence management as part of it, well detailed. So it has to be part and parcel of the codes that will drive that establishment, that will drive that organization. So it's important that it is codified. The third point there is the effective use of push and pull. I have already explained that it's not just a push. There is also the what? The pull. How do you use incentives? How do you use, how do you reward good behavior? How do you showcase good behavior in such a way that people can look towards the good behavior? And at the same time, how do you punish outliers? People that have decided that there will be a problem. Now, in that push side of the conversation, what is important is that there are no sacred cows. Because if you have sacred cows, then it will become the law made for the what? The politically inferior. So there must be a baseline. The line must be drawn on the things that we consider as important and the things that are serious for us. No sacred cow. And then the last point on this is accountability, monitoring, and evaluation. And this is where all of us in this room will play a very crucial role in ensuring that this is embedded, whether it is in the public service or in the private service. Audits, compliance checks, evaluations, that's our bread and butter. And we must, as accountants, live up to the expectation of accountability wherever we are found. Someone said that it's almost impossible for misappropriation of any form to happen without an accountant. We need to be able to debunk those kind of arguments and say that wherever you have seen things done right, an accountant was involved, an accountant was there to straighten and sharpen the edges, an accountant gave a report, an accountant was the custodian of those things that were done right in that organization, in that public space. That's the kind of narrative we would like to see. And that's the narrative that ICAN is known for and we want to continuously be known for. So if I move to the next slide, my next slide is saying, when consequence management is absent or poorly implemented, what happens? The first point I have there is a perception of non-inclusion. Have you been in a circle where a group of people feel that we are not part of what they are doing here? Once they take that position, whatever you are doing, right, the idea will be to do what? To pull it down. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, they will not care. So we must avoid a situation where there is ingrained perception of non-inclusion, because the ultimate end of such things is anarchy and total apathy towards government policies, or even in the private sector, it will be total. You will even get to the point where those people become saboteurs. So apathy is even nice, but you can get to the point where they actually begin to sabotage the efforts of government or the establishments where they work. Another thing that is closely related is where consequence management is absent or poorly implemented, you will see lawlessness and impunity. Now, you begin to see very undesirable behaviors, like rent seeking, and a nation is deemed to begin to fail or in the process of failure when people prefer rent seeking to productive endeavors. But those are the kind of things that happen when consequent management is not well in place. Because at the end of the day, I can get away with it, and then from getting away with it, I begin to facilitate other people to get away with it. And right there is the problem. So I begin to seek rent, I become a contractor for non-compliance, and then you will just have a situation where things just begin to go down south further. Now, the third point, and I like to talk about this because it's very important. Now, when you have a system with very poor consequence management framework, we have policies, reforms being introduced, but the management framework is poor, you will distort competition. And when you distort competition, especially for businesses, when I know that I am fighting fair and square, but there are so many other people within my sector, within my industry, who are not fighting or competing fair and square. What will happen is that investor confidence will be very low, and ultimately you will find capital flight, and people begin to check out of that region because, it seemed to have been created for a few. So that's also very important, and for us as we think about consequence management. And the last one is leakages, inefficiencies. You have, in some instances, you have parallel collections, non-remittance for government revenue, and things that should ordinarily accrue to the government that they will use to facilitate social goods. You find that you're not able to do them. So the point is that everybody gets hot. The timing might be different. But everybody gets what? Gets hot. If you think about the COVID period, we're all here. Everybody was here. Nobody could travel. Nobody could go anywhere. And so we all had to manage our health and infrastructure the way they were. Everybody got hot. Consequence management. If we had thought about it earlier, it's easy to think that today I will not be part of it. But at some point, everybody will ultimately pay dearly if we do not embrace it properly. But this is not where we want to be. So if you go to the next slide, I'll show us where we want to be when it is properly implemented. So when it is properly implemented, there is wide acceptance of the reforms by stakeholders. Okay? I was privileged to be in a program with some of my colleagues in Europe. And in Italy, they were paying taxes, total taxes, when they put all the state, local, and everything, it was closer to 54%. And the young man was cool with it. And he said, well, my children go to public schools. The public schools, everybody, all the kids, everybody is in public school. Healthcare is covered. So I essentially take the 46 to buy clothes. I have a mortgage system that works. I take the car on mortgage. I take the house on mortgage. So I'm fine. Okay? And when people are caught doing what they should not be doing, they are punished. So in such a system, there is wide acceptance for the reforms. You understand that it is for you, and for those that go against such reforms will ultimately face the music. So you are very comfortable, you are aligned. The policymakers become more believable, whether it's in the private sector or in the government circles. You become more believable when over time you have instituted a framework for consequence management. And bear in mind what we described as the framework for consequence management. Now, if you do that right also, regulatory oversights and roles between regulatory bodies will be well defined. Everybody will know their role, and everybody will feel relevant in the entire scheme. And then we can have, very transparent government that makes for progress as a nation. So it can work. We have seen it work in some instances, and we want to see it work in other instances. So it's where we want to be, as opposed to the previous slide. As I begin to round off, let's move to the next slide. All I have said today, I have tried to put in 5 points. So if you have not been listening to me, maybe you want to listen now, and that because this is my key message as I round off, okay? I said, look, we need to embrace a more holistic view of the concept of consequence management. It's not all about sanctions. It must be anticipated. Steps must be taken. You must also have a system that cushions the adverse effect of reforms. You must have a clear communication plan, and then you can talk about sanctions, and then subsequently the evaluation, the audits, and the monitoring that needs to happen to ensure that it is well, managed. I said that consequence management, if we're going to get it right, it has to be institutionalized. It's not a 100-meter dash. It has to be a part and parcel of the policy formulation, of the reform agenda, and it must be such that we can't even talk about the implementation of such a reform without a clear view on the elements of the consequence management. I said we can adopt technology to strengthen the monitoring, the evaluation, and ensure that the reforms deliver measurable impact. We must ensure that compliance is enforced in a manner that deters future non-compliance with no sacred cows. I must say that in bold, with no sacred cows. If we have a good and efficient consequence management framework in place, it will help us to build trust and transparency. It will help for ethical leadership and professional excellence. So, as I leave the stage, I'd like to leave us with my thoughts, which is on the last slide, on what consequence management really, the role it plays in reforms. So my view is that reforms without enforcement are aspirations without impact. Consequence management is not optional. It is the link that makes the reforms real. Thank you very much for listening to me this morning.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. Can we please give him a round of applause one more time? Just a slight interruption. I just want to announce the arrival of the representative of the executive chairman of EFCC. We have with us today the special advisor regulatory compliance to the executive chairman of EFCC, Mr. Francis Usani. Please welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you. And over to the chairman of the session. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you are welcome, my brother. We thought that because you don't have people to arrest here, that's why you did not come on time. Am I right? Okay. So we are men of integrity and accuracy. So there's nobody to arrest. Abi, is there anybody to arrest here? Okay. So now that you are here, I think we can listen to you before we go to the next discussant to present your paper. Thank you very much. You are welcome.
Thank you very much, Chairman of the session. I'd always known, or the EFCC had always considered accountants as very honorable people, and we don't go after them, arresting them, because we rather prefer to work with them in partnership than harassment. But it's only when they go wrong that we arrest them. So that's the snag there. Sincerely, I apologize for coming in late. The executive chairman, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, had wanted to be here in person. It was just at the last minute that something came up, and he asked me to come and represent him. I want to stand on the protocols that had been established, because I believe that protocols had already been established. And because I've wasted so much of your time, I want to go straight to his paper. Permit me to express my profound appreciation to you for the invitation extended to me to serve as a lead speaker in this epoch-making occasion of the 55th Annual Conference of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICAN. The theme, Building Resilience, Realigning Reforms for Nigerian Development, is apt and reflective of our common realities, where government constantly initiate policies and reforms geared towards economic development. It is only important that we strive to appreciate these reforms, understand the underlying objectives of government, and align our interests to meet these objectives of government. Let me use this opportunity to congratulate and appreciate all the organizers of this conference and the setting up of this platform, which will afford us the opportunity to air our views on such topical issues already outlined here. This conference, by my understanding, is designed, please, when I say my, I mean the executive chairman, not me. This conference, by my understanding, is designed to foster professional growth by providing insights into industry practices, especially in the area of understanding the emerging trends in accounting in Nigeria, sharing experience, and also creating an opportunity for networking with peers. On the topic, consequence management, the missing link in economic reforms. Generally speaking, consequence management is a concept that reflects a structured approach to predicting, identifying, and managing the negative outcomes of an event, encompassing both emergency situations and breaches of rules and regulations. Consequence management in the public sector entails the processes and controls for ensuring that officials of government and organizations are held accountable for their actions and for any failure to meet their responsibilities. It is a strategic approach in addressing misconduct. It fosters a culture of compliance, responsibility, and accountability by ensuring that fraud, waste, or unauthorized expenditures have their desired consequences. In consequence management, controls must address misconduct, unauthorized activities, and irregularities timely, decisively, and with a high level of consistency. Following from global patterns and standards in managing the conduct of unauthorized activities like fraud, corruption, and other economic vices, it starts from understanding the underlying gaps, the environment, and the vulnerabilities within the systems that allow people to do what they do, and developing strategies to mitigate those identified gaps. This strategy allows for proactiveness in managing consequences that may arise from reforms. Most critical and important in consequence management is the development of legal frameworks like the Fiscal Responsibility Act and a host of other legislatures designed to ensure accountability and transparency in government spending. It goes beyond mere establishment of legal frameworks, but it also entails good planning and budgeting, which ensures fiscal discipline and operational efficiency, linked to a broader macroeconomic objective of government. This equally guarantees that government actions are predictable and in an orderly manner, where problems can easily be solved when they arise. When rules and laws are breached, the breaches are traced easily, investigated, and prosecuted, as the case may be. Not having consequences following infractions of rules creates instability in the system. It signals that actions do not have repercussions, and where this is the case, resources, finance, and commercial activities would generally be suboptimal. Predictability and certainty in government business strengthens systems and empowers the rule of law, which also creates a sense of reliability in the rules for systems operating internationally and locally. It is worthy to note that enforcement of consequences for those rules set by government is non-negotiable. The responsibility to adjudicate and dispense justice, supported by the executive arm of government through the instrumentality of its investigatory and prosecutory agencies, like the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, which has sufficiently discharged its mandate aimed at ensuring that acts of corruption and financial crimes are investigated and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The EFCC has recorded huge successes in recent times, evident in the financial recovery of 300,597,370,151 naira, with United States American dollar component of $326,496,959, with other components of recoveries of different currencies. Out of the recoveries that the EFCC had recorded just within the span of this year, 22,708,262 US was recovered for the federal government, while the sums of 303,718,697 USD was recovered for individuals and the corporate sector. Besides these financial recoveries, the EFCC in 2024 recorded over 4,111 convictions from various criminal activities. The commitment of the EFCC indicates that the EFCC is not and will not rest on its oar to ensure that breaches of rules and laws have consequences capable of deterring potential criminals. The achievement of the EFCC, as indicated above, further goes to show that a strong consequence management regime boosts public trust and confidence in government, while poor consequence management encourages waste, corruption, and reduces the ability to collect taxes, and has an adverse effect in services to the rest of the economy, and investors' perception in the country is low. The link between consequence management and economic reforms. Reforms in themselves are an integral part of human existence. In our everyday life, we strive for change in various ways possible to better our lives and to meet global trends and patterns. In the public sector, reforms are usually geared towards improvements in government, solving crises, or achieving both social and economic goals. Reforms are necessary to fix dysfunctional systems, increase awareness, efficiency, and accountability. Reforms can come in various ways, either by enactment of laws, new laws, organizational restructuring, economic reforms, in terms of tax, labor, and market rules, etc. In most cases, public demands, crisis, social movements, or political leadership drives reforms. Reforms can produce both intended and unintended consequences. That is winner and loser. But whichever consequences reforms may bring, public support is key to their realization. Over time, Nigeria has carried out various economic reforms, dating back to what we can remember here, the 1986 Structural Adjustment Program, which was intended to promote fiscal austerity and stabilize the economy. This reform impacted seriously on low-income earners, thus raising serious public backlash. Reforms to capitalize and consolidate banks with the goal of strengthening the financial sector and improve stability and credit flow. The government has also initiated reforms in the oil and gas sector through subsidy removal efforts, and a gradual deregulation of the downstream sector, and a host of other reforms. All these reforms, in no little way, impacted the economic features or fortunes of Nigeria. The most recent economic reform in Nigeria is geared towards liberalizing the foreign exchange market, which has widened access to foreign exchange for businesses and investors, and aimed at stabilizing the currency and promoting foreign direct investments. These reforms may have contributed in putting Nigeria on where it stands economically in the global sphere. Other economic reforms in Nigeria are the tax and revenue mobilization reforms designed to broaden the tax base and improve tax collection to reduce Nigeria's overdependence in oil and gas, with the effect to increase voluntary tax compliance. Economic reforms usually come with challenges, which include limited resources or poor infrastructure to carry out most of the reforms, weak institutional frameworks with lack of competence to understand government reforms and realize them, and political inconsistencies, that is frequent changes in government and policies that disrupt reform processes and create uncertainties that discourage long-term investments. Most pronounced is the challenge of widespread corruption and diversion of government resources, thus undermining public trust. The missing link, therefore, in economic reforms in Nigeria clearly will relate to, as often stated, the effectiveness in the implementation of these reforms. That's how effective do we implement the reforms when they are made. The governance structure and the institutional willpower to carry out these reforms. Like many other reforms aimed at diversifying the economy, improving infrastructure, and attracting investment, the benefit of these reforms are often hindered by several factors related to lack of robust institutions to enforce policies and combat corruption, to ensure accountability and transparency. Corruption remains a significant obstacle that undermines reforms and deter investors' confidence, and the lack of effective private sector mobilization to genuinely drive government innovations. To address this missing link, institutions must be strengthened and the private sector should be carried along in making key reforms that will impact the economy. The establishment of a resilient, transparent, and accountable systems capable of sustaining and consolidating on the benefit derivable from reforms. Open government initiatives have over time shown to be an effective strategy in ensuring that government reforms work. This strategy is key also in applying consequences in the failure to adhere to its reforms. In conclusion, from what I have said so far, there's no gainsaying that there's a nexus between consequence management and economic reforms, and the link between them is justified through policies that enhance transparency and accountability and encourages unauthorized conduct like corruption and tend to diminish positive outcomes of economic reforms. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think without wasting more time or much time, we'll go to listen to Mr. Kolawole. All right, of Serap. And after that, the floor will be open for questions and what have you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure many of us are perhaps familiar with the saying that two people crucified with Jesus on his right and on his left. They said one is a lawyer and the other was an accountant. Your guess is as good as mine which one entered paradise with him. But because I'm a lawyer, I hold firm views of the one that entered paradise. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity to address this August gathering happening in October. A lot has been said about consequent management, and I'm very sure that everyone in this room is an expert in that, guys, because of what you do in that regard. But I'm here to bring the civil society perspective. And having worked for SERAP, which is the Economic Rights and Accountability Project, for a while, I've come to see in practical terms how these affects the everyday Nigerian, including everyone in this room. I will not repeat what has been said about consequent management, but like to speak to what perhaps appears to be the question of the missing link. And I'm very happy that that was phrased as part of the topic for this discussion. And I certainly agree that there is a missing link in our bid for economic reform and development in Nigeria. I do agree with Mr. Uzo that every reform needs a robust consequent management framework. And that one of the key things it requires, and I also echoed by the EFCC, is transparency and accountability. And that is what we've been doing at SERAP over the years to ensure that government is accountable to the people. The problem, it would appear, is not lack of a legal framework, as many would perhaps say. A lot will say there's a lot wrong with the Constitution and our laws. I do sincerely believe that the challenge is a lack of a political will to implement those laws. And I define political will to be the willingness of anybody who has power, whether in private or public sphere, to enact a policy, do an act, irrespective of his or her interest or the collective interest. Looking at the various mechanisms we have to bring about consequent management in Nigeria, we would see that if half of these agencies are allowed to work, perhaps the conversation we'll be having will be how to make it better. And perhaps we will not call it a missing link, but how to make it much more effective. We have the Office of the Auditor General, for instance, of the Federation, which is also replicated at the states, in all the states of the Federation, that ensures and does what everybody in this room perhaps does very well, which is to audit federal government agencies. In 2017, the Office of the Auditor General said that 3.5 trillion naira could not be accounted for by more than 80 ministries, departments, and agencies of government. That amount for the year that followed it is perhaps almost 50% of the total budget for 2018. Those funds are yet to be recovered. That is repeated with the figure going up a bit in 2018, 2019, up till 2021, which is the last report we've had from the Auditor General. So if these reforms that the Nigerian government is going about, or claims to be doing, is to bear fruits, we should plug those holes. And I'm not an accountant, but I do like the way the Auditor General frames his recommendations in his report, which I spent a lot of time reading. He always recommends two things: a recovery of those funds and the punishment, or perhaps call it prosecution, of those who I find liable. for how those funds have left. I also like to speak to one of those agencies of government that forms part of the public financial management, which also forms of the consequent management processes in Nigeria. That is the Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly, who has the mandate to examine the reports of the Auditor General and make resolutions after submitting his report to the National Assembly. Over the years, those reports have not been able to deliver anything meaningful because resolutions have not brought about any prosecutions or, in fact, any recoveries of those funds. Presently, SERAP has more than 32 lawsuits in court against various institutions of government, out of which 15 is on the Auditor General's report. And if perhaps there are government institutions in this room that we are yet to take to court for not being transparent and accountable, we can have a conversation before the end of this program, and we'll make sure you join that list. We've had instances where we've used the Freedom of Information Act to make requests of government agencies who refuse to provide such information, and we go to court. Sometimes we spend 5 years litigating these issues, and we get judgment. A very good one will be the one we got against the Nigerian government, particularly the Ministry of Finance. The Nigerian government had taken a loan, I think in 2015, to install CCTV and other security infrastructure in Abuja. The loan was in excess of $200 million from the Chinese government. We had sent a Freedom of Information request to the Ministry of Finance to tell us how those funds had been spent. We did not get a response. We went to court. Interestingly, lawyers came to court from the ministry, defended the suit, and the judge ruled in our favor 3 years ago, mandating the government to merely disclose how those funds had been spent. That judgment is yet to be obeyed. That tells you clearly some of the issues that we talk about when we talk about consequent management. Very interesting, it was during the prosecution of that case that a lawyer in one of the ministries, not for that particular case, accosted one of our lawyers on the corridor after the case and said, "We like what you are doing, please keep it up." Note that this lawyer is from the Ministry of Justice defending another case that SERAP had brought against the federal government. That means we all know that we are victims, as it were, of lack of proper implementation of consequence management. We can go on and on about the evils lack of consequence management brings, but I'd like to bring it closer home as to how this affects us as Nigerians. That 3.5 trillion naira that was missing and unaccounted for from the 2016 budget, which forms the basis of the 2017 report by the Auditor General, can build at least one public health center in all the states of the Federation. And that will mean that a lot of people that get to die because they do not have access to good health care would have been saved. It will improve maternal mortality. It would reduce, maternal mortality. Because primary health care centers should take care of those kind of issues in the various places where people reside in Nigeria. And that also means that a lot of money is, I would like to say stolen, but you would require me to add allegedly. And since I understand what defamation means, I will use the word used by the Auditor General in his report: missing. Now, where are those funds? We send a lot of freedom of information requests to ministries, departments, and agencies simply to ask questions. Most times, we do not get responses. Our response rate to FOI from SERAP is less than 5%. That is, only 5% of the agencies of government that we send FOIs to ever respond. And a positive response in terms of quality information is less than 1%. Mind you, this is simply a request for information. And that is why we got a judgment against the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs 3 years ago, mandating that ministry to simply provide details of the amount that has been spent, providing succor and social incentives protection for the vulnerable in Nigeria. That judgment, as I speak, is also yet to be obeyed. So we were not surprised subsequently about what happened in that ministry. That was just 1 year after we got that judgment. And for those who may say, why do we go to court so much at SERAP? It is because of the kind of conversations we're having here, which is, how do we ensure that consequent management, effective implementation of consequence management, impacts on the reforms government claims to be doing enough that we all benefit? The irony of the loss of power that occurred, I think 1 or 2 hours ago, wasn't lost on me, and I think everybody in this hall as well. How much was used to renovate this present hall? The last time I was here in person was, I think it should be in the 2000s. I remember it was President Obasanjo then. This is my second time here. The first time after the renovation. Who is the contractor? What was the process, the bidding process that existed in the Procurement Act to allocate that contract? How was it done? These are questions that we would ask by way of freedom of information request. Not necessarily to say there is corruption, but because the law requires these kinds of information to be in the public domain. Which is why the Freedom of Information Act mandates public institutions to proactively disclose information about their activities in several ways. On their website, through bulletins, and also to respond to such requests when any citizens make such a request. And that is why SERAP goes to court to compel these institutions to provide that information. And that is why I believe that if we can solve that missing link, the reforms that government claims to be undertaking, I believe, will bear much more fruit. So that renewed hope agenda does not end up being renewing private pockets, but renewing the hope for the Nigerian people. And it's very important to say that while transparency and accountability, or the lack of it, in other words, do not necessarily mean corruption, we can all agree they encourage corruption. And that is why the Freedom of Information Act mandates proactive disclosure of such of government activities. I would like to speak briefly about the role of the judiciary in consequent management. And I do believe that consequent management is not only punitive in its outlook, which is why I like some of the mandates of two particular anti-corruption agencies, the ICPC and the EFCC. They have public education mandates in their laws that allows them to prevent corruption by educating the public, not necessarily prosecuting them. But what happens more often than not that incapacitates the judiciary is still the lack of transparency and accountability that has brought about even the slow pace of judicial proceedings and hindered the administration of criminal justice. That means that whatever has escaped the Accountant General, whatever has escaped the Auditor General, whatever has escaped the various institutions that will ensure public financial management as part of consequence management, may end up also escaping the gavel of the judge in court. Because the judge writes in longhand in every proceedings. There are courts in Nigeria that don't have functioning air conditioning system. They do take the light in court as well. I've seen that happen a lot. And I've seen judges who have told lawyers to remove their wig and gowns so that we can proceed with proceedings in the absence of light, so that the lawyers don't die of suffocation. This has happened to me in court several times. So it means a case that should take 1 year to determine the culpability of somebody that's stolen public funds lasts sometimes 3-5 years. That is at the court of first instance. And that also means that the credible evidence that the judges need, including the infrastructure to do their job, doesn't exist. And that is why we must understand that consequence management, or the lack of it in Nigeria, the missing link we've come to identify, is everybody's business. And we must ensure that in our private capacities, we need to ramp up our advocacy to public officers to make sure that they do what we've elected or they've been appointed to do while in public office. I will close by saying that the kind of advocacy we need in Nigeria should be devoid of 3 things. There should be no politics involved. Tribalism must be absent. And it should not have any religious fervor in it. If we can do that, no, the applause makes me think I'm one politician. That there is a particular politician that has praise singers in the crowd every time he says something. Those 3 evils that I've come to call them, politics, tribe, and religion, mars the advocacy we do to hold government accountable. And that means that if your political party holds power in your state or local government, you do not see anything wrong in what they do. It means if perhaps the governor is of your ethnic extraction, it means he's a good guy. And if he's a Christian or Muslim, depending on how you believe, he or she can do no wrong. Those things mask the advocacy that we do to ensure that the benefit of good governance comes to everyone. And if you ask me, have we been able to ensure that those who have stolen public funds get their just deserts, the punishment we need? The answer is a no. And that perhaps is why they took light. We lost power here 1 or 2 hours ago. And that is why perhaps you spend a lot on generators than you spend on things that should actually benefit you. And that is why we have come to have this conversation today, to ensure that we all, as responsible citizens and seasoned professionals, do our part to hold government accountable. Thank you very much.
Wow. You know, I was writing before, I cannot write again. I was just listening to him, and he spoke so well that you wonder whether he came from somewhere. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It has been a very good session. Okay.
Q&A.
Yes. All right. So we go to question and answer now, because our time is nearly gone. Despite the fact that we started the program on time, but we have listened to erudite presenters and they have just made good use of the time. So let's use the remaining time to go to questions and answers. How many questions shall we take? How many questions shall we take?
We can do 4.
Huh?
4.
4. Okay. I'm told that we should take 4 questions from the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to balance it from the 2 sides so that we'll be fair. And I want to be gender balanced. So number 1, sir. So please, once I identify you, come out. Number 2, please come out, the man with the cap. Do we have any from the rear? You are too close to this side so that we can have. Then let me balance it. Anyone from The gallery. Gallery. Oh, please come down, so that will be number 3. From this side. I want to balance it. Any swan. Sorry, any swan. I'm coming to this side. Okay, madam, please come. Let me balance it. So somebody is coming from the gallery. I don't want to. So that makes it, my chairman, sir. Just 5 of them. 4 in here. Then 1 from the gallery wearing an ash color dress. Please, can we have the Robin mic, please? I want to make an apology to the 5 of us. Thank you to all our presenters. Give us your name, membership number, and straight to your question. You try to give us a lecture, I will interject, and I will collect the mic. Thank you very much.
My name is Odukoya Olusoji Olumide, 3927. Politics, tribe, religion. Effective consequence management, mediating effect of plea bargaining. Plea bargaining. It has disrupted effective consequence management. Whatever you steal in Nigeria, 20 billion, 30 billion, and at the point of judgment, we recover 2 million from you, you can go. You are encouraging murder. So what EFCC, I don't know whether you have done any study on effective consequence management, the mediating effect of plea bargaining, and what has been your findings. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Salisu Saad, membership number 18374 from Federal Revenue Service. My question goes to Mr. Uzo on the lack of government policy inconsistencies. If you look at the current reform, I'm going by the national tax policy introduced in 2010, and also a revised document was issued on 1st February 2017. The government is looking at the reduction in direct taxes and increase in indirect taxes. By 1st January 2026, we'll be seeing increase in personal income tax with the minimum threshold of almost 15%. So I don't know what are you doing from KPMG to advise government on these directives. I know that the National Assembly refused to increase value-added tax because this is one of the cash cow in the economy. I'm a tax collector at the federal level. So we need to be seeing more of indirect taxes. But from next year, direct taxes will be increasing. Also, the capital gain tax of company will be shifted to 30%. Individual also will not be paying CGT at 10%, rather at their threshold based on the tax rate. So please, what are you doing to advise government so that to be focusing on the policy direction of government? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 3.
My name is Tumba Adewale Bakiro, 5185. My question is to the gentleman from ZERAP. We've had the good jobs that ZERAP is doing. We've had the fact that we went to court, to seek information, to seek information using the information bill. Sometimes we are in court for 10 years and thereabout. But the question I want to ask you, going forward, because most of your actions are reactive, that's after the event. So what are you doing to be preemptive so that people, the government, before they spend the money, you're already looking at what they are doing? And secondly, what are your success story since you have started? Because you are always in court. In fact, I even thought everybody that worked in ZERAP are lawyers. You understand me? So what are your success story in recovering government assets? Thank you.
Thank you. Number 4.
Okay. My name is Flora Ojeme, 44501. My question is to our EFCC man there, or representative. With the millions of recovered funds, you said millions in foreign currency, and I believe that would translate to trillions in naira. Why is the government still collecting more loans? That is number one. And all these funds that are being collected, what are they being used for? And what are also the things that you are putting in place that we can follow the funds you are collecting and actually see what is being used for? Finally, are there consequences to the government? Because we are women, I'm representing SWAN. And are there consequences for the government if the impact of all these reforms that they are bringing right now and the recovered fund are not felt on the populace? I would like to know that.
Thank you very much. The question from Swan, I think, covers the four from SMAN. The last man, have your question.
Yeah. Timothy Norem 65048. My question goes first to the EFCC in and around cutting of waste. You did mention some part of that in your presentation, but how firm or what provision is in the law that helps you to really cut this waste? And how are you acting upon that? Because the political or the leaders or office holders really need to be held accountable for this waste. And to Serap, the person on number 3 did mention some of my question, but just to ask, quite the number of cases in courts, how many would you say you have won or successful? And I keep reading quite a lot of your cases and could not really follow through to know what has been the outcome of most of these cases in court.
Thank you. It's about the success story, which I believe the Serap man will do. So my chairman, you and your panelists to respond to them, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we should start with the EFCC man, because most of the questions are to him. All right. Let him answer some.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman of the occasion. And the questions, I wasn't, it would have been a disappointment to me if the questions were not concentrated to the EFCC. So I welcome all the questions. Well, it only goes to show how strategic the EFCC as an agency or anti-corruption agency is. But to address the very first question that from Mr. Olusanya, that talked about plea bargaining. That plea bargaining is diminishing consequence management. I don't agree with that question, and I'll say no, it is not. The adoption of plea bargaining in our judicial or administration of judicial justice systems, it's something that had been researched extensively and discovered that it is the best thing to do, given the kind of peculiarities Nigeria has. I agree with my brother from Serap when he says I talked about delays in court. And I want you to understand that for every matter that is in court, that an EFCC operative goes to court, taxpayers' monies are being used. And it is better rather to save those taxpayers' monies than, allow them to be frittered away. So, plea bargain has a structure of taking away the benefit of the offense from the criminal, which is the key and most strategic way to deter criminals. Because for every criminal, it is the benefit from the criminal activity that motivates him to commit the offense. So you don't just go to do plea bargain without necessarily, or without putting something down. And at the EFCC, we consistently insist that before we even go into any plea bargain, you have to first and foremost restitute and refund everything that you had collected. So to that extent, the recovery of the proceeds of the offense is in a way a consequence management, because at the end of the day, you're not allowed to go home with what you stole. And if the system is so consistent in itself, you will discover that if somebody steals today and tomorrow he's caught and the money is taken away from him, and he does that tomorrow, and the same thing happens to him, he will sit back one day and say, oh, what's the point that I have to steal? Because at the end of the day, this money is going to be taken away from me. Is that an acceptance of what I'm saying? Or so I do not agree. I do not agree that plea bargain diminishes consequence management. And one thing I want you to also understand is that even if you get off the rope through plea bargain, there's a conviction. And that conviction, or having that toga of a convicted person, also takes away many privileges provided for you in the Constitution. Like you can't contest elections, you can't hold certain office responsibilities. So that's on the plea bargain. I don't know if I can continue with other questions. Yeah, I think the questions that had to do with recovered funds. Madam Flora asked about recovered funds and why the government is still collecting more loans. Well, on the area of loans, I think I don't have the competence to speak on that. The EFCC doesn't have the competence to speak on why government is collecting loans. I think you as accountants are in a better position to tell us that. But what the EFCC does with recovered funds is that those funds are sent to the federal government consolidated revenue account. And it depends on the nature of recovery. If it's a recovery that has to do with an individual, the EFCC restitutes that money back to the victim. But where such recoveries are made on behalf of the government, the subnational government, such monies are paid to the federal government consolidated revenue account. And then one thing I could also tell you that that those monies are done with, if you look at the Process of Crime Recovery and Management Act 2022, specifically section 71, 72 or thereabout, it has actually given the government or given us the criteria for how such monies, recovered funds are handled. But I recall recently, I think sometimes last year, the EFCC actually paid 50 billion naira to NEL Fund at the directives of the executives to support the Nigerian Student Loan Fund. So that's how such monies are being done. Like, I want to reiterate also that the other issues why government collect loans despite these huge, humongous recoveries, I can't speak on that. Then somebody talked about cutting of waste. Well, the EFCC is doing so much. If you look at section 6 and 7 of the EFCC Act, and particularly section 7 EFQ of the EFCC Establishment Act 2004, it did give the EFCC very huge preventive powers. And with the coming into power by the current executive chairman, Mr. Ola Olukoyode, he had established and enhanced the recovery mechanisms of the preventive mechanisms of the EFCC by even establishing a department, a separate department that had to do with fraud risk assessment. First and foremost, that department assesses fraud, undermines or determines the gaps and vulnerabilities, within a particular sector. The focus now is on MDAs. And the pilot project now is dealing on contracts and procurement. So we are proactively, we don't now wait for people to come and make reports to us. We go after MDAs to see how they conduct their contracting processes and procurement processes. I mean, that's a strategy that the EFCC had actually adopted now to prevent government waste.
All right, thank you
Thank
very
you very
much.
much.
Let's have your own view, response to the questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To respond to the questions asked, the preemptive actions of SERAP will include capacity building, public education, and public enlightenment. Some of the conversations we've had here today has made us see some of the benefits of advocacy and holding government accountable. And we also engage with government from time to time as part of to ensure that government hears what they need to hear to do that on behalf of to use power on behalf of the people. And that is why we write open letters to the president from time to time to ensure that we provide policy advisories to government. And again, maybe just to elaborate on this, SERAP is just an NGO. We are a CSO, we are not a government agency, so we can't really do much than what we're doing presently. And that is why we go to court as a last resort. And as to our successes, I was trying to take note here. One of the cases we've gone to court for that we got judgment, which I think has really impacted Nigeria, would be the case of what I call the pension lawsuit. We had gone to court in 2018 to challenge the payment of pension laws to governors and deputies in Nigeria, and they earn billions of naira annually, by the way, after having served their 4 or 8 year term, depending on how much time they used. And the court, that's Federal High Court Lagos, Justice Ogundoyibo gave judgment in favor of SERAP in 2019. And that has led to some of the states repealing their pension laws. Lagos cut it by half. Kwara State repealed that law. And I remember the former Senate President, Dr. Bukola Saraki, also saying, because we had written to him, that he's not earning pension after he was elected into the Senate. That is a remarkable success to me. It means that monies that otherwise would have gone to people who have been governors and deputies at least stay back in the states. But I cannot guarantee how those funds have been used in their respective states, though. How many cases have we won? Lots of it. I can reel off. Presently, we have more than 15 judgments over I think a 15-year period against the federal government. Some has been enforced, some hasn't been enforced. I'll just speak to one of them. We had gone to court to challenge the ban of Twitter, if you recall, by former President Buhari. And the ECOWAS court gave a ruling. There was a provisional ruling stopping the Attorney General of the Federation, who had threatened then to arrest any Nigerian and prosecute any Nigerian using VPN to access Twitter. And the court had ruled clearly that he doesn't have such powers. And ultimately, the court ruled that that ban of Twitter was unlawful and mandated the government not to repeat such again. Perhaps this admission would have banned Twitter if not for that kind of judgment from the ECOWAS court. Thank you very much.
Mr. Obieno, any?
Okay. So let me speak quickly to the question raised by my fellow taxman. Yes, you're right. The move world over is to move more towards indirect taxes, because indirect taxes are inclined towards consumption and a bit more, they are more progressive in nature. So as you consume, you spend. And if you don't have, you don't consume. So it's progressive. But let me take you back to how we got to where we are now. Now, you recall that if you're very conversant with our tax system in Nigeria, what we have as VAT is not really what is practiced as VAT in so many other climes. What we have currently is closer to sales tax than VAT. So if you're conversant with the NTA, the new law, what the NTA did first was to first make our law proper VAT. By that I mean that every input will now be recoverable through the input and output mechanism of the VAT system. That wasn't the case prior to now. You could only recover direct inputs or raw materials that used for the production of goods. But when you do that and you do not increase the VAT rate, what you will have is a hole. Because what you have now done is that everything can now pass through. But
but you have kept the rate constant. When you do that, then we will be toying with possible issues around fiscal stability for the government. So once that was not achieved, it became rather difficult for anything to happen as far as the direct taxes are concerned. But if I take you even to the direct taxes, you will realize for personal income tax, you must be an annual income earner in 8 digits for you to notice any increment. If your annual income is less than 8 digits, then you're not going to, in fact, you will have a tax rebate. The Fiscal Policy Committee has been talking about that the idea for them was to protect the most vulnerable and see how they can collect a little bit more from the rich. So if you look at it that way, well, it seemed to have increased the tax of the big boys a little bit, while the more vulnerable people will have, less tax to pay from October 1. And of course, CGT, we can talk about that, but clearly it's around helping the government to manage excessive planning with respect to rate shopping between CGT and companies' income tax. Lastly, I'd like to say that the law is not perfect, but we needed to start from somewhere. And then as we progress and we see the imperfections play out more clearly, then it will be time to then look at how to amend some of it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think we have exhausted all our time, and we want to thank you for your contributions, especially those who ask questions. And I will hand you over to our moderators for the rest of the program. Yeah.
Can we put our hands together for the chairman and the panelists for this session? In our usual tradition, we do appreciate our presenters, and permit me to invite the immediate past president of our great institute. Join me as I welcome Chief DCS Alaribe, FCA, as he assists in making presentation to our paper presenter this morning. A round of applause for our IPP as he steps forward. So the first presentation goes to Uzochukwu Obieno, FCA. Please, a round of applause for him, please. So to the middle, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning. On behalf of the 64th President of ICAN, the Council and the entire members of the Institute, they say you have done so well. Let me also say that you look well fed. Thank you for coming, sir. Please, can I have the...
The next presentation goes to the Deputy Director, Sarah Kolawole Oludare. A round of applause for him, please.
Thank you very much, sir. When you spoke and when people made a lot of comments, they said that they thought that the work of Serap is only to go to court. But you have explained the processes. I also learned one or two things. Until the heavy wind blows, you will know that the Reverend Father wears sneaker. So that's what I have seen now.
The next presentation goes to the representative of the EFCC chairman. Join me as I welcome Mr. Francis Usane. A round of applause for him, please.
Thank you, sir. Oga EFCC. We thought that anywhere you go to is just to arrest people. But you've also come to discuss with us. I came very late. I would have asked a question. But since I have the opportunity, if you climb an Iroko tree, you get all the firewood for yourself, your family, and your village. I cannot ask my question, sir. or make a comment. One also expected the EFCC to, on quarterly basis or yearly basis, to publish the amount of money they recovered. That is one, sir. If they recover that money, they should also tell us what it was used for, so that it won't be recycled. So, sir, that message we are sending to you, you take back to your organization. We are looking forward that the message you are sending through the smoke will get to the sky. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, IPP. That's to the representative of EFCC. And finally, to our revered past president, who is the chairman of session, join me as I welcome Deacon Titus Shueton, FCA.
My revered past president, you are still looking very handsome. Even though you have left the presidency, but ICAN-ngr work is a pharmaco work. Each time they need you, they will call you. We, on behalf of the 64th president, we thank you also for this support and also for coming. I also saw the happiness in you. You also say you were writing, you stopped. You didn't know I have my own level of happiness. But like I always say, there's happiness in madness. Only the madman knows.
Oh, sincerely speaking, I didn't know that has been done. The president is not here, but can we have the chairman of the 55th annual conference, the IPP presidency, the chairman BOPP, please join our presenter for a group photograph, please. The second deputy vice is the chairman of a BOPP. Please, let's join them for a group photograph. Thank you. And please, after the group photograph, our presenters for this morning, Obieno, the Serap Oludare, and the representative of our EFCC chairman, we won't mind to have you on our online TV station. The guests are actually waiting for you to take you to our studio. So please avail them just a few minutes, and they will definitely engage you with the interview session.
We will now get ready for the next plenary session, which is titled Beyond the Milestone, Redefining the Future. This session is particularly crucial to us as an institute as we celebrate a milestone. We're looking backwards and looking to the future on how our institute can be even better as we venture into the future. So this plenary session marks a significant moment in our history and celebrates 6 decades of a remarkable achievements, institutional growth, and national influence. It will highlight and engage the Institute's key milestones, enduring contributions to Nigeria's economic and governance architecture, and its role in reshaping the accountancy profession. Speakers will reflect on ICAN's leadership in advancing financial reporting standards, promoting capacity development, upholding public interest advocacy, and instilling professional ethics. Our session is structured around 2 thematic reflections. We will be honoring the past, so looking deeply at ICAN's history, landmark policies, growth, membership, international recognition, and the Institute's influence on national development. We will also be looking at how we plan to redefine this future, a forward-looking conversation on the next 60 years for ICAN. Speakers will explore strategies for ICAN to match and surpass their peer PAOs, harnessing technology, digital certification, and data-driven reporting frameworks. We would also look at the possibility of expanding ICAN's regional and international influence, reinventing member value for a new generation of professionals, embedding sustainability, governance, and ethical leadership into our future agenda. This session invites us to reflect and to have a foresight as we draw strength from the past to shape the bold and visionary future.
And definitely to chair this session, which is the plenary for celebrating 60 years beyond the milestone, redefining the future, is no other person than Sir Albert Adewale Agbebi, FCA. Please, a round of applause for him as he steps forward. Let me quickly roll the abridged profile of the chairman of session. Sir Albert Adewale Agbebi served as the president of ICAN 2000-2001. During his presidential year, he provided leadership at the pivotal time for the Institute, helping to strengthen ICAN's role in professional advocacy and institutional standard. In addition to his contribution to ICAN, he remained active in professional and public life. He serves as the chairman of the body of past president, BOPP of ICAN, playing a central role in upholding institutional memories, mentoring younger members, and representing the legacy of past leadership. His reputation is rooted in integrity, institutional continuity, and stewardship of the professional heritage. As session chairman, he will bring a blend of historical insight and visionary guidance to steer deliberations on how ICAN past achievement can inform its future trajectory in reforms, members' growth, and global relevance. Once again, let's put our hands together for the chairman of session, Sir Albert Adewale Agbebi, FCA.
Joining our chairman on the podium is our next discussant. Has to do with our future. And this is a former registrar, chief exec of ICAN, the former rector of Yaba College Technology, Pa George Majekodumi Okufi, who is a revered statesman of Nigeria's accounting profession and education sector. He holds the distinction of having served as Registrar Chief Exec of ICAN, where he guided the Institute through important transitions and institutional strengthening over many years. A consummate administrator and visionary, Pa Okufi's tenure witnessed tremendous institutional development, expansion of membership base, and the strengthening of ICAN's examination and regulatory frameworks. His leadership and management foresight contributed significantly to expanding the credibility and public perception of the accounting profession in Nigeria. Before his tenure, Pa Okufi made significant contributions in academia. He served as a rector at Yaba College Technology from 1975 to 1985, becoming one of the longest-serving rectors of the institution. During his rectorship, he was the first indigenous and first chartered accountant to lead the college, overseeing academic expansion, administrative reforms, and the strengthening of the technical and management education mandate. Under his leadership, The college achieved institutional growth and elevated its profile in producing technical and professional manpower of the nation. In recognition of his service, Yaba Tech recently named its new School of Management and Business Studies complex in his honor, the George Majekodunmi Okufi Complex. On this topic, celebrating 60 years, beyond the milestone, redefining the future, Pa Okufi brings a rare combination of deeply rooted institutional memory, experience in education and professional practice, and perspective on how far the accounting profession has journeyed and where it must head next. Pa Okufi is ably represented today by our one and only past registrar, revered registrar, Mr. Olutoyin Adekpate, OON FCA, registrar of ICAN from 2008 to 2013. He is the registrar emeritus.
Can we put it together for our past registrar? Also to join them on the panel of discussion in marking our 60th anniversary is our past president of ICAN, a business leader and a thought leader. He is a veteran of Nigerian accountancy profession and corporate governance landscape. He serves as president of ICAN 1995 to 1996 and is fondly known within the institute as the chief storyteller. His distinguished career spanned public service and private enterprise. His early service include work with the Federal Survey Department and at the Accountant General Department in Lagos. He later became a partner at ZO or Shosoya and Co. Chartered Accountant in Ibadan, rising to senior partner in 1978. Beyond accountancy, Chief Oguntimei holds leadership role in businesses. He is the chairman of FTN Cocoa Processing PLC and director at Femi Johnson and Co. Limited. In recognition of his service, he was awarded the National Honor Officer of the Order of Niger, OON, an old traditional title in Odo Kingdom, including Bogi and Lisa. Our revered past president, 1995-1996, Chief Sir Simon Olushola Oguntimehin, OON FCA, ably represented here this morning by our own revered past president, 2012-2013, and the man I refer to, a great golfer par excellence that does it the way it should be. Join me to welcome Mr. Doyin Owolabi, FCA.
And the last member of the panel who's going to take us through to the future is Dr. Daniel Manei, FCA. He is a leadership consultant, former global executive at an SP 100 multinational. Dr. Daniel Manei has a doctorate in business administration from the University of Manchester, UK, distinguished chartered accountant, been a fellow of the Chartered Profession Accountant of Canada, US Certified Public Accountant, CPA, fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, and renowned leadership consultant, over 30 years of experience in multiple industries. Dr. Manei served as CFO at MasterCard Canada and later as division president at MasterCard, overseeing operations in more than 40 countries across the sub-Sahara Africa. Dr. Manei is globally recognized for his thought leadership on strategic leadership and is an author of the Amazon bestseller, The Pragmatist Optimist, on leading through turbulent times. He has presented papers at various international fora, including being ICAN-nominated speaker at the 2014 World Congress Accountants in Rome. He currently consults with organizations and executives worldwide on transformative leadership, culture, and strategy. Professional colleagues, please give a huge ICAN round of applause to Dr. Manei as he walks to the podium.
On this note, for the next 90 minutes, we'll yield the floor to the chairman of session, our own Sir Albert Agbebi, FCA. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. Good morning to everybody. That's low. Good morning to everybody. Good morning. Although the president is not on seat, I would like to recognize him as the 61st president of our great and noble institute, Malam Haruna Yayaya, and I'd like to recognize all the past presidents here present. My due regard also to the president of IFAC, who is on seat, and the chairman of the conference committee, Mr. Chief Akin-Sulore. It is a pleasure for me to welcome all of you to plenary session 4. This session is a special one. It is a session which allows us to talk to each other as members of our institute, ICAN. ICAN is a noble organization, and this session provides us the opportunity to tell our own story in our own way. Simple, straightforward, factual, and untainted. It is the story of our journey as ICAN from inception to age 60. It comes under the theme, celebrating at 60, beyond the milestone, redefining the future. We are 60, and it gives me joy to wish all of you happy anniversary. I'm hoping you will respond by wishing me too a happy anniversary. I congratulate the President, Malam Haruna Yaya, and all council members for this celebration occurring during the tenure of their office. It is a notable achievement, even without serious efforts from them. This is how luck complements success. Attaining 60 years of age for any person or an entity is a worthwhile milestone. It is a diamond jubilee celebration as it symbolizes maturity, endurance, strength, rich history, and timeliness. It is a good time for reflection and assessment of the progress or achievements attained to see if it is in line with the initial objectives of establishing ICAN. and whether it meets the objectives and the plans, and whether it has been a hopeless or a fruitful journey. I hope it has not been a waste of time. The objective of this session, obviously, is to highlight the Institute's key milestones and enduring contributions to Nigeria's economic governance. And towards this end, the conference committee has put together a distinguished panel of eminent speakers to assess ICAN's journey so far and to pronounce a judgment. The past President, High Chief Sir Simeon Oguntimehin, will speak for the perspective of honoring the past with regards to the birth and growth of ICAN. Unfortunately, he is not here, but has written a paper which will be presented by the past President Doyin Owolabi. GM Okufi will deal with the administrative policies that sustained and strengthened the Institute for several years when he was in office as Registrar Chief Executive. In redefining the future, the renowned Dr. Daniel Monahan will offer ideas and enduring strategies, including technological architecture that will propel the Institute to remain an enviable global leader amongst its peers, PMUs. There is no doubt that any institute that does not interrogate itself and adapt to changing technologies will eventually lose its relevance and importance. It is for this reason that I consider this session very crucial and critical. It is indeed marvelous that we have this opportunity to carry out this critical review. The experts will speak and we will listen. As chairman of this session, my primary role is to ensure that we have a smooth and impactful engagement that is beneficial to you all as participants, and I take that task very seriously. I'm confident that with your support, we shall achieve our objective. I thank you all sincerely in advance for your positive contribution. We tend to keep within the time limit that we have been given, and we hope you all have an interesting time in this session. I thank you all.